again at the end. I mean, it was a bang play at the plate. The ball clearly beat the runner, but we just dropped the ball. And sometimes that happens. And that's a great summary of life. Sometimes you just drop the ball.
Sometimes you just drop the ball. Carolina baseball coach Mark Kingston coming in and what the TV kids call a cold open. Welcome in to the Wednesday edition of Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent. Good to have you along. Tough night for the Gamecocks in Hoover. And boy, have we said that a bunch through the years, right? Gamecocks now 29-51 all time at the SEC baseball tournament, which has not really meant a whole lot through the years. Has unfortunately become more and more important in the last several years as the records have been less and less impressive, the NCAA tournament resumes. And this year's Gamecocks end up under 500 for the first time since Ray Tanner took over the program back in 1996 after the 2-1 kind of dramatic loss last night in the 10th inning, which Mark Kingston was referring to there, where there's a play at the plate. For some reason, Florida didn't decide to score or didn't try to score on a previous play. And so you had one out, runners at second and third, short fly ball, little liner into center field. They get a good opportunity to get a guy thrown out at home. You see a good throw by Evan Stone. Lee Croy filling in at the plate for Colin Burgess. Can't quite hold on to the tag, and Florida escapes with a 2-1 win in extra innings to start SEC tournament play. And they now move on to the double elimination portion, play Texas A&M. The Gamecocks in their season under 500, disappointingly for sure. Anthony in first, as always, on the YouTube live stream. Good to see you, sir. He says good morning to all the UFAs out there. Craig, Mark also weighing in with a hey and a howdy. And then Adam with a 10:02 hot take. The hitting is so bad. Like, how can you bring back Mark Kingston like he is a so-called expert at hitting? That's a joke. Well, he was asked about the hitting after last night's game and mentioned how young his team is and how freshmen across the league have really struggled at the plate and how many guys they had kind of at the bottom of the lineup typified that for sure. Florida's guy last night going really good. He is really good, but 6 1/3 no hit innings, certainly not what you're looking for from the Gamecock perspective. I know there is a lot of frustration out there, like Adam's talking about. Craig says sums up the entire Kingston era. I would say certainly half of it, where now you've seen a couple of years right at the 500 mark. And again, not accustomed to that from the Gamecock baseball perspective. York in on the program on the YouTube live stream. Good morning to you, York. Trey says it hurt so badly watching Scott Wingo send a man around third that's literally moving slower than Lieutenant Dan. Now, that's not fair. Not fair, Trey. Josiah Seitler playing through injuries. What they said when he hurt his ankle, they went in for an x-ray to make sure there's no structural damage there, and they found a stress fracture. And Seitler was the guy at the plate for Carolina for most of the year from a power perspective, leading the team with 15 home runs. Gets a big hit last night, hit and run there in the 9th inning, where Carolina had not scratched across a single run the entire night and had very little show for it, right? First hit coming in the 7th inning. And so that was like their 3rd hit of the game, I think. Maybe 4th hit of the game when, with 2 outs, Scott Wingo does wave Josiah Seitler around third base after a hit into center field, and Florida makes the place. And did anybody else think like me at all last night? It is a much smaller scale, no doubt, but we were talking about it yesterday. I was talking about it with my buddy John Wilson from out in Texas, who traveled with Texas A&M to that 2011 College World Series. And Texas A&M, in his 18 years of covering the program, 0-4 at the College World Series. One of those games was the opener there in 2011 against the Gamecocks. And later that year was the epic series with Florida, right? And the epic throw out at home where Florida looked like they were going to be on their way to being in prime position to win the national championship. But the Gamecocks made a play there. They made so many plays through that run. Florida made the play last night, and Carolina couldn't make the play at the end. Also a victim of some misfortune with Jalen Vasquez playing exactly where he needed to be. No doubles on the third base line early on in the 10th inning. He wasn't even going to have to backhand a ball over the bag. He had already gotten in front of it. Hits the bag, goes over his head. He had no shot at it. To me, it just seems to be the baseball gods to some degree, evening things out for a program that had so much success and seemed to get near every break in that magical run. But unfortunate for Gamecock baseball, no doubt. No doubt. How would fans react if Tanner brings back Kingston? It's a good question from Adam, and another comment just talking about a potential Gamecock baseball coach. Let's hear some more from this team first, and then we'll get into that discussion, okay? A lot of interesting comments last night from several players. Will Sanders was fantastic on the mound for Carolina and kind of matching Florida pitch for pitch. It wasn't a no-hitter like the Gators had going for 6 1/3, but giving up just one unlucky run. Again, another kind of typical recent version of South Carolina. It's a tough play at shortstop, a runner on second base, a bit of a chopper to the right, and the play tries to get made off balance to first base. Give the Florida runner a ton of credit from the get-go. As soon as that ball was chopped into the ground, Florida runner thought scoring. I am scoring. Rarely do you ever see a runner score from second on an infield hit, but that's exactly what happened because Kevin Madden over at first base did what he could. He saw the runner that was going around third. He knew he had to make a play at home, gets his body in front of it, ball pops up, and he's got no shot to get him out. And so heads up play by Florida. I don't blame Carolina's defense necessarily there. It would have taken an amazingly high IQ to keep from trying to get the guy out at first, knowing how aggressive the Florida base runner was going to be. Ideally, yeah, you look at it again, you say, hey, you faked that throw to first. I think Ben McDonald might have mentioned on the broadcast. You end up faking that throw to first. That was going to be really difficult to get the runner, and the guy at second probably rounds third. You get to nail him over there. That would have been ideal, but didn't happen. So that's how Florida took the lead. Gamecocks, again, got to give them credit. Didn't go away in the 9th inning, down 1-0. Figure out how to scratch a run, little hit and run, little fielder's choice from Andrew Eisters, kind of pounded one in the ground, beating out the potential double play ball. And there Carolina is kind of still trying to stay relevant, to stay competitive, to scratch and claw in the whole thing, and yet it didn't happen. So we'll get into the larger discussion for Carolina baseball first. I think it's fair, especially this game didn't end until relatively late last night, even though it was scheduled for a 2 p.m.-ish start with all the rain delays going on in Hoover. Didn't get done until, I think, 10:30-ish, 10-ish, somewhere in there, late. I was busy out watching my 9 and 10-year-old team get victimized by a walk-off win. So I got my own issues to deal with from that perspective last night, and maybe my own perspective now on coaching and or just my own personal. If I can't get a 9 and 10-year-old team to the championship of a rec league, who am I to criticize Mark Kingston, right? So that's where I'm coming from, fresh off of that disappointment last night, just so you guys know how we're starting this conversation. But wanted to be as fair as possible, coaches, players, and fans. So we're all in on the discussion. You guys hear a little bit from last night's post-game reaction. Going to share my screen here. We'll start with Andrew Eister, who has been a guy for Carolina for a while now, clearly the kind of the leader from an offensive perspective this year, and an easy guy to root for, and he was emotional. Asked in this clip, by the way, from Gamecock Central, Colin Taylor. That's who the question is from, and I wanted to let you hear Andrew Eister.
Take me through the emotions you're feeling right now, just kind of as your career wraps up, what this place in this program means to you.
Yeah. I was afraid you're gonna ask that. I've talked about it before. How coming in 4 years ago it was just a place to play my 2 years and move on to pro ball, and things things don't always work out as you plan, but sorry, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. How these last 4 years have gone. I feel like I've given a lot to this program, but what I've gotten in return is substantially more. I've gotten some of my best friends, people that I consider family, a home, a home away from home, somewhere that I'm probably going to live once I'm all graduated and done with everything, and just the future, a life, life outside of baseball. And, that's something that I don't know if I deserve that, but I'll forever be grateful for this place and for this program, for the community, for the university is done so much for me and my family, and I'll forever be indebted for sure.
So clearly emotional, as you would expect from a senior, from a guy who put so much into this Gamecock baseball program, the guy that helped Carolina move it to extra innings last night with the RBI fielder's choice, bringing in the lone run. Man, powerful stuff, I think, from Andrew Ice to really summing up college baseball for a lot of people. Will Sanders is who we should hear from next. Was so good on the mound, and it was odd, no doubt, the season that Carolina had in so many ways, but especially his, because he ended up moving to the Sunday starter, and that's just how Carolina ended up going with it, right? Kind of unconventional, even though he was the ace, especially with all the arms going down that you're going to hear more about here in a second. But I thought he was asked here how his mindset was, kind of his perspective of the pitching duel last night, and a tremendous response, I thought, here, and some good insight from Will Sanders, the Carolina right-hander who gave Florida all they could handle and then some. I think ended up with 10 strikeouts on the ball game. This is Will Sanders.
I think those are the best types of ball games because it's just a rhythm. He goes out there, gets 3 outs. I go out there, get 3 outs, and we just keep playing. And it's a tough game, but that's why we all play baseball. It really is sad that we were on the wrong side of that, and we just, one ground ball that takes a weird bounce off a bag. It kind of is the epitome of our season. Just looking for ways for us to take advantage of it and come up short is sad and really heartbreaking because we've been through so much adversity and so much struggle and injuries with everybody out. We've just tried to find ways to win games, and it's hard, but I just view today as another opportunity and do what I can do, show the team, and just give the team some confidence to keep playing, stay in the fight, and see what happens. And we were on the wrong side of a weird circle ball.
That weird circle ball. Will Sanders. He's always had a way with words and had some fun, I think, with his post-game comments. That was no fun for him at all, but that ending was a classic Will Sanders, I think, in so many ways there. Man, he was really good. Mark says, Andrew Eister instantly became my favorite player on the team, I believe. Sanders was solid, no doubt. Another comment popping in there. Eister's an amazing dude, Mark saying. Yeah, no doubt about it. And we'll talk to Stuart Lake, former Gamecock assistant, tomorrow. I believe we're going to have him on for the weekly segment. And he and Eister have had a really good relationship for a long time and know each other really well. And I'm sure we'll hear a lot more from him on that. And, man, it's tough for me to watch guys. He says Mark had a personal experience there with Eister when she was 4 years old in a meet and greet back in 2020, and he was awesome. That's great to hear, man. It's great to hear. And tough to watch the raw emotion after that ball game for a guy like Andrew Eister, who has to turn the page now, move on to a next chapter of his life, and classy enough and strong enough to be vulnerable in front of a microphone and cameras and to let us in a little bit. Impressive. Mark Kingston also, I think, maybe as open as we've heard him, maybe in his entire tenure at Carolina, or maybe this is just the direct result of all the emotion that was into this thing and all the struggles throughout the season. He had plenty to say last night. I mean, not out of the ordinary, right? It was only a 15-ish or so minute press conference with both of those players and the coach. So it's not like he just went on and on and on. I'm not trying to say that, but was pretty open, honest, and clear with his thoughts in the post-game press conference as well. Wanted to play some of those for you as we move on this morning and get the conversation, I guess, started or going with the evaluation of what the Gamecock program is right now and where it's headed. So without further ado, let's get some Mark Kingston in here comments and we'll move on from there. So Mark Kingston, I think this one basically just summarizing in general what happened last night and how it relates to the entire season for Carolina this year.
This is just disappointment in not having the success in the win-loss column that we know is expected, but also keeping the context of why that happened. And along the way, the guys did not give in to the frustration, to the adversity. Look, some years everything goes right and you stay healthy and all the prospects turn into production guys and everything goes right. And then some years it's just whatever can go wrong can go wrong. In both those situations, you've got to handle it properly. When everything's going well, you got to learn how to win with class. And when everything is going wrong, like it did for this year, I think you've got to teach guys and you've got to try to make sure the group never gives in. And this was the latter. This year was the latter. And again, that was a hell of a ball game out there. It could have gone either way. And we fought till the very bitter end. And that's what I'm going to remember from this group. Fought till the very bitter end when they knew the disappointment around the program and the win-loss record, but also within the context of why it's happened, they could have given in and they did not. And so that's what I'm going to take away from this group.
So get you a little bit more from Mark Kingston coming up here. But that's what I'm talking about letting us in a little bit more maybe than usual, and was eventually asked in last night's press conference, again, right after the ball game, keep that in mind, but I think appropriately asked kind of the message to fan. I think you're actually going to hear the question here from Michael Lanana to give you the full context here, which is what I want to do. So we're not taking anything out of context, and we can start the discussion in the most fair way possible. I know that's a weird thing from a media perspective, but that's what I want this show to be. That's what this show will be. And I think that's what will part of the reason this show will be different. And hopefully you will continue to spread the word and find this valuable. Here's more from Mark Kingston, the state's Michael Lanana, on the question side of things.
What would your message be to fans who, might come away from this maybe a little disappointed from this?
Yeah, we're all disappointed. We're all disappointed. But again, in my opinion, the word context is what matters most. When you factor in, you had 10 pitchers throughout the course of the season that pitched either very, very little or not at all, and what kind of impact they would have had on our one-loss record. I mean, Mississippi State, Chris Lemonis is a good friend of mine. They lost a couple pitchers, and you saw how devastating it was to their overall season. We lost 5 times that or 3 times that based on whether you consider they lost 2 or 3 guys, whatever. It handcuffed us. It just did. And so there are days I look up and say, man, how did we win that many? And there are days that you look up and you say, man, if we had this guy or that guy, just 2 or 3 of the 10, it's a completely different season. So My message is we're disappointed as well. But on the inside, we know exactly what this team probably could have done had we just not been so unfortunate with the volume of injuries.
Again, more from Mark Kingston last night after the 2-1 loss to Florida in extra innings. So what do you take away from that is my question. Now that you've heard some extended comments, we knew the injury situation going in. He pointed it out. The critics are going to say used it as an excuse. I'm trying to be fair here. Evaluate this as fair as possible. I think he mentioned it in the explanation, right? I mean, he also said you dropped a ball. Sometimes you drop the ball. The question I think is now, how does this program move forward? Mississippi State, no doubt, that's true. National championship last year, last in the SEC this year. A great example of a program couldn't have been at its highest, higher. It could have been higher. And then key injuries in the SEC, no room for error, and on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Hoover House of Horrors, Double R says. And no doubt that's what it's been. SEC decision makers need to move this tournament venue around because Carolina never wins there. Is that why? I remember this, but when I guess the contract came up 5-ish years ago, somewhere in there, and it seemed likely, I think, there was a lot of public sentiment, or maybe just from the South Carolina standpoint, that this could bounce around a little bit. The tournament venue I'm talking about, like the ACC tournament has done, it's Greensboro. This year's Charlotte. It's popped around a few different places. I think that is a completely different conversation, one that is a very minor blip on the radar screen that is Gamecock baseball right now, and how does it move forward after a sub 500 year overall, 27-28. Again, the SEC record, no shame there. Talking about the Mississippi State comparison, look at Florida, right? Kevin O'Sullivan was the guy I think all Gamecock fans wanted to replace Chad Holbrook if possible, knowing his connections to the state of South Carolina, being a former Clemson assistant, obvious success at Florida. And then he goes and wins the national championship as the coaching search is going on. And that didn't happen, obviously. But there he was, just a couple of games better in the SEC. Now, Florida got it turned around more convincingly and really stepped up late and is going to go to the NCAA tournament and the whole thing. But just to whitewash it and say Mark Kingston is not a good coach, well, that doesn't make any sense, right? We saw the moves work last night. Hit and run. Manufactured that run in the ninth. A lot of college baseball lineups are going to struggle against Florida's starter that threw last night. But ultimately, it's about accountability, right? Accountability for this season. One other season that went very similarly to this, which was the worst of the century to that point, the worst in the last couple of decades. And so now the conversation becomes, all right, where's this thing moving forward? And if Mark Kingston continues to be the guy, I know it's a tough sell to fans who demand excellence. Just like virtually every SEC program, any program that's won national championships in baseball should. Excellence. Sustained excellence. I would say there's been one season under Mark Kingston where Carolina ended up one win away from the College World Series in his first season, where you could make the case that was excellence. That was at the level it needed to be, even though it was a bit of a late run that year. It wasn't a dominant season by any stretch of the imagination, especially when compared to former Carolina teams. Craig says, I mean, all the injuries aren't just because, or all the losses, I should say, aren't just because of injuries to the pitching staff. Rodney says, our message is we are all disappointing. My opinion is get over it. We all get disappointed. That's what I get from him. Now, see, that's not what I got from him. What I got is I understand the expectations. I understand this team did not meet those expectations. I hope you understand the reason we think that happened was because of a slew of injuries to really important pitchers. I think the ultimate question becomes, is that good enough? Is that a good enough explanation? Mississippi State's a great example. If they fired their head coach this year, that'd be the dumbest thing of all time, right? Chris Lemonis just won a national championship. This time last year, he was the greatest coach in college baseball. Fast forward a year later, last in the league. And that's what I heard from Mark Kingston more than anything else as well. Kind of the opening comments. Some years are like this. But from the South Carolina baseball perspective, that wasn't a thing for so long. It's really hard to justify that. There are so many inherent advantages. You know, we've been talking about that Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher thing and how Saban has so many advantages being at Alabama. And as soon as he's seeing any kind of crack in the foundation or other people slithering their way towards the top, he's comes out and did what he did and the whole thing. Well, South Carolina is not where Alabama football is, South Carolina baseball. And you could argue maybe they weren't ever quite to that level of dominance, right? But they were dang close. You win 2 straight national championships and play for a third in a row. You go to 3 straight College World Series, kind of a separate entity several years before, separate chapter. It's a dominant program. And it has not been recently. And that is majorly concerning, I'm sure. Craig says, and if we were starting so many freshmen, where are the sophomores and juniors? They haven't developed. That's another thing, too. And maybe I'll play that answer for you. That was the one part in last night's post-game comments where I thought Mark Kingston did not hit the right note. Asked about the offensive struggles, mentioned how freshmen have struggled in general from an SEC perspective, but that's the thing. At South Carolina, you're not expected to have the typical freshman across the SEC in the starting lineup for sure. I mean, of course, SEC programs are fantastic, right? But if you found your way in the starting lineup, that's on the guy responsible for the program and the talent. And if it ain't good enough, then that's on the coach. That's on the recruiting staff. And I understand, man, with COVID involved and the whole thing, extenuating circumstances, but all programs have dealt with those same type deals. Now, they all didn't change head coaches exactly when the Chad Holbrook to Mark Kingston era happened. But you start explaining that stuff too much, I think that's where coaches help themselves out the most, by giving out the least. By sometimes when you're asked to explain a situation, there is no good answer. Even if there is a good explanation. If you think there's a good explanation, right? That's why a lot of coaches, I think Will Muschamp got to that point, right? Where he wouldn't say anything hardly at all. He knew it would be used against him. It absolutely was. And it got to that point. But this is where it comes down to, if you don't win, no matter what you say, will be held against you. And unfortunately, Mark Kingston has gotten to that point with Carolina baseball by finishing under 500 in 2022.